The Forbidden Portal, My Encounter with Scary.com. This account is 100% true. It was never meant to be a terrifying story, but rather an eerie recollection that continues to haunt me. Looking back, the whole experience sends chills down my spine. If anyone out there happens to come across an archived version of this old website, please reach out to me. I can't stress enough how important it is. I don't know how many of you have even heard of this site. It was relatively well known back in the early 2000s, a time when I was just beginning middle school, and my imagination, along with my paranoia, was operating at full capacity. I had a strange fascination with fear back then. Horror movies never really caught my attention, but I found endless enjoyment in reading creepy stories, whether printed in books or floating around online forums. One afternoon, bored and restless from seeing the same old tales repeatedly, I randomly decided to type www.scary.com into the browser. I don't know what pushed me to do it. Maybe curiosity, maybe intuition. But I thought, anything's better than reading High Beams or The Big Toe for the 100th time. What greeted me was odd. A cartoonish bat flapped onto the homepage. It was meant to be goofy, almost comedic in design, yet something about its gaze felt off, like it was staring straight into me. Still, I was hooked. I knew right then this wouldn't be just another cheesy site for kids. When I clicked the bat, it flew through a spinning portal and dropped me into the site's main hub, a bizarre, otherworldly map where I could access different locations within the Scary.com world. I ended up spending hours exploring. While the visuals were clearly designed with children in mind, the audio told a different story. It was disturbing, otherworldly, and unsettling in ways I couldn't quite understand at the time. My first stop was the bedroom. Hovering over various objects would trigger links or strange sound clips. One in particular stood out, a tape recorder that stuttered, "I see the shadowy figures moving out of my," before cutting to a shriek so blood-curdling, so disturbingly authentic, I instinctively turned around to check if someone was screaming inside my home. It wasn't an actor's scream. It felt real. That moment sealed it. I had to keep exploring. I had to know more. Eventually, I reached what would be my final destination. The cemetery. My memories of this section are murky, but I do recall one unsettling figure, a hunchbacked man tapping endlessly on a coffin with a shovel. He never acknowledged my presence, never made eye contact, just tapped over and over. The cemetery itself was strange. Coffins rested above ground instead of buried beneath, and one ominous bark hole stood out from the rest. I clicked it. What I saw next was grotesque, a twisted underworld that felt like a parody of hell. Scattered throughout were caricatures of celebrities who would speak brief lines when clicked. Toward the far end stood two figures, a silent vampire and an impish demon wearing a gas mask. These two didn't speak. I kept clicking them repeatedly, intrigued by the silence. Without knowing it, I had clicked in a precise sequence. a pattern that triggered access to a hidden second room. This second room was where the nightmare truly began. The screen faded to reveal a solitary coffin in the center of a pitch-black void. Around it lay the scorched remnants of various national flags, each one reduced to ash at the foot of the coffin. Inscribed on its lid, in bold, burned-in letters, was the word Society. I clicked it. I wish I hadn't. Suddenly, my screen flooded with pop-up windows displaying real images, not fake, not animated, but genuine photos of dead children. These weren't scare tactics or horror movie props. These were crime scene images. Mutilated, brutalized, crucified. I remember one boy whose head looked as though it had been crushed by a truck. His skull was flattened, his brain splattered across the pavement, blood pooling beneath him. My stomach turned violently. I felt like vomiting. I slammed the power button and ran to find my mom. I tried explaining everything to her, still shaking. She insisted it was probably special effects, some elaborate hoax meant to scare kids. But I wasn't convinced. I went to the kitchen to drink some milk to distract myself, but I overheard my parents talking downstairs. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. I couldn't hear what was said, but their voices sounded serious, concerned, frightened. When they came back up, my mom looked like she had been crying. They didn't tell me what they saw on that site. My dad just told me one thing. You are not to talk about that website again, ever. Later that night, once they had both gone to bed, I snuck downstairs. I needed to see it again, maybe to prove to myself it hadn't happened, or maybe to confront whatever trauma I had stumbled upon. But when I typed in www.scary.com, I was blocked. The site was inaccessible. They had blacklisted it from our internet, and just like that, it was gone. The nightmares followed me for months. Even now, years later, I still dream about that boy, the one with his face flattened and his innocence erased. I sometimes ask my parents about it, just to see if their story would change, but they always deny everything, like it never happened. I've only tried to revisit Scary.com once since then. All that remains now is a 404 error. I've scoured the internet, searched through countless archives. I found one incomplete version, but it predates the events I experienced. The second room, is nowhere to be found. I even had some friends follow the same steps I had taken. Nothing happened. Either they didn't do it right, or the room only existed for a brief, horrible window in time. To this day, I still think about that website. I've come across disturbing content before, sure, but that level of horror, showing real dead children on a website that seemed aimed at 6 to 12-year-olds, that crosses into something else entirely, something evil. And even now, a part of me still wonders, does that link still exist somewhere, buried deep in the web? I don't want to see it again. I don't need to. But something about it, the taboo, the mystery, the sheer horror of it, has never left me. It was more than a website. It was a window into the darkest corners of humanity.